Okay. Yeah, we'll get the preliminaries done. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I am so excited about this particular joint a collective TA session. The importance of case management and coaching. OFA in general has invested a lot of money and a lot of resources in helping TANF agencies look into coaching and incorporate it into their case management. We, as an organization, and me personally, think it's a great way to empower individuals or help them feel empowered, help them make their choices, and help them to understand the benefits and the repercussions of making choices. And I found that it's really helpful in parenting an adult child because you can't tell them what to do, but helping them to make decisions on their own and set goals has been helpful in my personal life. And so, and we've also, the Peer TA has a coaching model that was designed by one of your speakers today from the PCG. And it's been very helpful in, and we've heard many great testimonials about how people are incorporating that this method into their case management. So I hope, hopefully you will gain something from hearing from experts and them talking about their tools that are available for you to use to incorporate coaching, as well as talking to your peers. So I'm excited today, and I hope that at the end of the session, you'll be excited as well. Thanks, Jeanette.
Thanks, Lisa. Hi, everyone. I'm Jeanette Hersig with BLH Technologies. I'm the project director here on this OFA initiative. We have quite a packed agenda. There's a lot going on today. As Lisa says, it's really a focus around case management strategies and coaching and what does that look like. This session here, and for I've spoke to all of the presenters today. The 10 laser TLC sites have been together for quite a while, and they've been working on their own change agendas, their own innovations, and there's been a lot of interest around organizational culture. What does coaching really look like? How do we think about skill sets and mindsets for their staff? So this really builds off of work that we did in June. It takes it to the next level of going really a little deeper into what is coaching and sharing some really important information around the different models. As I said, we have a really packed agenda today. We're going to start off by hearing from Rachel Brooks and Fran Moore from the Prosperity Agenda, who's really going to level set about what is coaching, why do agencies use a coaching model, and what are some of the different models out there. Then we're going to spend a good 50 minutes or so really having a little bit of a deeper dive into these models, both from the standpoint of getting what is the model from some of the designers and developers of those models, some of the real subject matter experts, but then hearing from the front line agency of saying why they did something, how they did it, and what are some of the lessons learned from doing so. So we're going to have a feature on family-centered coaching. We have two speakers, again, Fran Moore from the Prosperity Agenda, and then Donna Johnson from the state of Georgia. Goal for it will be John Mckay from Mathematica and Jerry Cotter from the state of Ohio. We have a feature on Goal, Plan, Do, Review, Revise with Donna Pavetti, the with the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities, and Rhonda Archer from the state of Oklahoma. And then the Human Services Coaching Framework with Robin O'Brien and Ida Johnson from Public Consulting Group, joined by Kimberly Arista from the state of Hawaii. And they're going to be sharing with you, they'll each have each set of speakers will have around 10 to 12 minutes for them to talk through what the model is and what were some of the operational elements that they used in absolutely implementing these efforts. And then after that, after this, it's some ways like speed dating. After this presentation, you'll move on into breakout sessions. So all the participants, you all can choose whatever breakout session you want to go to. And if you want to sit in one breakout session for the 30 hours, 30 hours, right? 30 minutes, you'll be more than well. You can do that. You can switch and flow from all different of the 4 breakout sessions. Those sessions will be facilitated by one of our TLC coaches. So the speakers the speakers will go into the breakout. They'll be assigned to the breakout groups, and you speakers will have a facilitator on site to help. Yes, it's 30 hours. I know you're laughing at me, but so that's it. As I say, it's really packed, and I want to move very quickly into it. So I echo all of Lisa's welcome for you today, and look forward to hearing from our speakers and hearing the questions from our teams. With that, I'm going to turn this over. I believe, Fran, you're going to take us through a presentation to really kind of set the fundamentals around coaching.
Thank you so much, Jeanette. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning to some of you, depending on where you all are on the planet Earth and what time zone you're in. And so good morning, good afternoon. I hope all of you are having a great day so far. And if your day is just getting started or you're not having such a good day, I hope that by the end of this session, you'll have a reason to smile and to think about something a little more positive. My name is Franciria Moore. Everyone calls me Fran, so feel free. I am the Senior Learning Manager at the Prosperity Agenda, and I am here to talk with you today about coaching in human services. Before I get into it, I always like to throw a question out there. I mean, here I am standing in front of you, being all vulnerable. I would love to get you all involved and have you answer the question, what's something that you might be better at if you had a coach to help you? So if you could just drop that in the chat box, I'd love to get to know a little more about you all, because I'm about to stand up here in front of you all for not quite 30 hours, but for a few more minutes. And so if you could just drop it in the chat box, what's something you think you'd be better at if you had a coach to help you? John said exercise. I hear that every year come January, folks want to sign up to get a personal trainer, get a coach, right? Let's see here. Public speaking, sewing, life in general. Wow, yes, absolutely. Dancing, public speaking, another public speaking, persistence and following through on goals and commitments. Wow, absolutely. Quilting, bodybuilding, sleeping schedule. Oh my. Wow, what is sleep schedule since the pandemic? I have no idea what that is. Thank you for pointing that out. Cooking, we got cooking again, losing and maintaining weight, decorating my house. Wow, I've never thought about that. Someone to decorate my house. I think when I, as a single person, all my walls were bare. I never had much that matched. I like paper plates and things that you could dispose of. Playing the saxophone, cooking, public speaking again, writing. Let's see, hula hoop. Wow, that's on my bucket list. You know what? I like that, Jessica. That is very ambitious. I still haven't quite figured out the hula hoop or double dutch. I'll tell you that. Weightlifting, baking without a recipe, instruments. You would have saved thousands on student loans had you had a coach. Wow. And it goes on and on and on. Thank you all for sharing so much. Self-care, jumping rope, financial investing and planning, leadership. Thank you all for sharing that, right? Those are all things that if we had a coach, you've identified that if you had a coach, it would be something that you would be better at. Okay. And that's the general idea behind coaching in human services, that if a person has a dedicated coach that's there to support them in whatever the thing is that they'd like to achieve, the likelihood that they'll achieve that thing shoots up exponentially. We recognize that in our personal lives, and we hope that over time, as we pool our resources and we identify the models that are best for us, you'll also see that this is the way that human services agencies and organizations across the country are beginning to shift the way that they think about the relationship between participants in their programs and the goals that they set. So let's dig in a little bit deeper here and talk about coaching and human services. Coaching and human services are fairly new phenomenon. We're talking about something over the last 10 to 15 years that's really taken a hold. Previously, the idea of coaching, right? So all of those things that you all named, life coaching, health coaching, career coaching, quilting, right? All of those things have a type of coaching that can go with them. That means you could be coached in anything. But previously, coaching was not something that was available to the general public. It generally was reserved for folks who had a level of economic stability and could financially afford to have that type of help and support. Okay, it was withheld for folks who had access. Right, even if I have the money, that means that I have to also be near someone who knows how to do coaching. Right, and so coaching in human services is pretty new, but the goal, the three things I want to quickly throw out there as a goal of human services, coaching in human services is one, it's a human-centered approach that offers the practitioner a way to center the person and not the program. I'm speaking from experience. I've been in human services for over 12 years. I've had my peaks and valleys. I've gone through burnout. I've gone through pure frustration and disgust and feeling let down. And I've also know the high of like winning awards and grants and having crazy numbers and all of those things. And I'll tell you the one thing that could take you from a mountaintop to a valley low, okay, is feeling like you don't have within your tool belt as a practitioner all the things necessary to really help the person sitting in front of you. And so as a practitioner, many times folks find themselves having to prioritize the program and not the person in front of you. Okay, so what can I talk about with you that also lines up with something that I can check off in a box? The other thing is that coaching relies on the expertise of both the participant and the coach. Okay, so the participant brings a knowledge and an expertise about themselves and their life and what's important for them and what they value. And the coach brings in expertise about how to navigate the system. Okay, and that's where the expertise stops. Okay, as a coach, we get to alleviate ourselves from the massive weight and pressure of having to come up with the answers for everything for everybody. It's something that we like to call the fixing approach. Okay, and then the last thing I'd like to point out about coaching in human services is that it does not replace traditional case management, but it seeks to amplify the effectiveness through a fluid approach. That means that not only am I here to help you address the crisis, put out the fire, but I'm able to do that within a system that allows me to meet you where you truly are. Okay, and not just say, hey, we're in the third month, let's do X, because that's what the plan subscribes. All right, so what is coaching? Coaching is a partnership to help participants set and achieve goals through collaboration and intentional practice. Okay, that's my one word answer for what coaching is. It is a partnership. Okay, so if anyone like me loves a good basketball or a good sports movie, you know, raise your hand or throw something in the chat box to let me know. I love a good sports movie, right? Well, this isn't that, right? When we think about coaching, we're not standing on the sidelines drawing up plays and telling the players what to do. Instead, we are collaborating so that we can help to create the environments that make the change possible. All right. I adopted my daughter and I moved to New Jersey 4 months prior to that. And I knew not a soul. I know someone in the back said, what kind of craziness? I know, everybody, trust me, I know at this point. And I remember one of the biggest challenges that I would have was that I would have Imani in my arms and I would have a whole bunch of groceries and then boom, I run into a door that I couldn't open. Okay. And there was nothing more perfect than a stranger walking by and simply holding the door open for me so that all I had to do was focus on walking through it and getting us safely in the house. And that's a lot of what coaching does. It holds the door open for someone so that they can focus on the things that are necessary for them to get to the outcome that they selected for themselves. So coaching is not only a practice, it's also a mindset. It's not just about how I show up in the way that I speak to a participant. It's about the way that I think about the participants that I serve, okay? And then the last thing that defines what coaching is the participant brings an expertise of themselves and their goals, and the coach brings expertise of the system and how to navigate that system. Everyone plays a role in this work. So really quickly, just want to show you all this spectrum. We talked about fixing. Some of us probably may be familiar with this. Problem solving without hesitation. If we were to go back, I believe it was Lisa that spoke earlier and that opened us up talking about how we could, really use a lot of the coaching approach in the way that we parent adults around us. And so if we were to think about this, fixing is when we jump in with no hesitation and we solve the problem. Okay, how many times has a participant walked in and you said, bingo, bango, I know exactly what to do. I've seen this a million times and I got it. Okay, fixing, right? Nothing wrong with that necessarily. It has its appropriate times. This is more so where you'll see case management coming into place. Well, we want to begin to move across this spectrum away from fixing and lean more into the side that is coaching. This is more about asking. It's about partnership to explore for solutions. This is where we get to be very curious, okay? And this is where we get to bring a little bit of what you have and a little bit of what I have, and bingo, bango, we're going to be now living in the realm of coaching. All right. But along the way, we hit some consulting, we hit some counseling, we hit some mentoring. But ultimately, in human services, organizations are moving toward coaching. All right. For many reasons, but we don't have time to really break into all of the ways that this could have a positive impact on diversity, equity, and belonging. This could have a large impact on staff retention, the way that we think about our staff and how we employ people. It really has ramifications throughout your entire system because, again, it is both a practice and a mindset. Coaching is not this. It's not backseat driving, okay? It's not saying, oh, I'm going to let you drive. And then from the back seat, you're making the thing go the way you want it to go. All right. And it's also not this, let me fix this for you. Right. It truly believes that participants are creative, capable, and resourceful. This fixing mindset says, or this fixing approach says, the practitioner relies on their experience, knowledge, and expertise to resolve the challenge that the participant is experiencing. Anyone been there? Anybody been a fixer before, whether by choice or by force? All right, where you've either been the person who was expected to have the solution, or you put yourself in that role and then you looked around and go, oh my, what did I get myself into? That's the fixing approach. And we have a fixing mindset, okay, where I'm a hammer and so I see everything as a nail. It's the same thing. And so that's why we have to be aware, am I in a taking a fixing approach, or am I taking a coaching approach? And a coaching approach is a trusting, collaborative, and non-judgmental partnership focused on supporting the participant in setting and achieving their goal. The goal is for them to set their goal and for them to practice that goal. And the core tenets of coaching relationship is trust, collaboration, and non-judgment. Okay. You cannot be curious about someone that you are judging. Okay. And then the last thing I'll say, I'm kind of giving you all my friendisms, is that you cannot be curious if you are being nosy. Okay, nosiness is about judgment. Curiosity is about understanding. And the more we can lean into understanding and empathy, the more likely that we can develop those trusting, collaborative, and non-judgmental relationships. But I want to make sure that we understand in coaching, there's curiosity, okay? Fixing, there's some nosiness. Real quick, here are some differences between coaching and fixing behaviors and mindsets. Coaches ask powerful questions. They focus on what the client wants to achieve. They honor confidentiality. They provide positive feedback and acknowledgement. They listen actively. Fixing behaviors kind of look like telling what the client what to do, focusing on what you think the client's goals should be, making judgmental remarks, right? It might be taking time to feel me. Okay, anyone know what it's like to be sitting in a meeting and need to feel the silence? That's a fixing behavior, okay? A coaching behavior is comfortable in the silence. I like to use the 8-second rule in my coaching, okay? Because whoever is doing the most talking, that's whose meeting it is, all right? And you want to remember that when you're taking this coaching approach. Let's see. I think that's all I have, but that's the basic overview of what coaching is and why we do coaching. We do coaching to put participants in the driver's seat. Okay. It is really based in the principles of trauma-informed care. Okay. That we should be asking permission, that we should be holding the focus of the participant, that we should be collaborating with them and building trust. And so that's what a coaching relationship is all about. And so that's all I have, Jeanette. I don't know how you want to transition out of this, but
Okay. Well,
yeah.
thank you, Fran. Thank you so much. I really appreciate setting the context here. And you've gotten some really positive responses here. Awesome sauce. And that 8-second rule, boy, oh boy, that really resonated with several of you. I'm going to transition really quickly right into our practice model features. Again, we have about 10 minutes for the team to speak. And we're going to start, and I will kind of give a little notice, a little wave to say, oh, we only got 2 more minutes left. Again, it is really important that, sites really hear, these teams really hear about the why, the what and the why of doing the models that you've done and the choices that you've made. So I'm going to start actually with you, Fran, starting off with family-centered coaching. And you'll be being joined, I know you know Donna Johnson well, from the Director of the Development and Partnerships at Georgia's Department of Early Care and Learning. And I believe Donna is on.
Yes.
I see her. Okay. So Fran, why don't you kick us off again? There's 10 minutes for the two of you. And if you have some time for Q&A, I'll take it. But remember, there will be a 30-minute breakout after these presentations, so we can go a deeper dive with a lot of Q&A from the sites. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you again, Jeanette. And thank you, Donna, for joining us. I also want to point out that our co-managing director, Rachel Brooks, is also here. You'll likely see her in the chat box. So if you have questions as I am rapidly speaking about this particular model, please feel free to drop those in the chat box and she'll respond to you. Family-centered coaching, that is the name of the model that we work with at the Prosperity Agenda. A quick blurb about what family-centered coaching is. Family-centered coaching is a framework that guides the formation of trusting, collaborative, and non-judgmental relationships between practitioners and participants. The family-centered approach can be used with anyone, regardless of their familial status, but this framework is specifically designed to support individuals that must set and achieve their goals within the context of family. So again, anyone can use the tools and approaches built into our model, but it specifically thinks about the folks who have people that they are interdependent upon, a community, a network. And so it's not just about their familial status or legal or blood relation. It's about who the people are that participant identifies as their greater network. We know that folks who are interdependent on others and have a family and community and a network tap into a higher level of motivation than individuals that don't necessarily have those same pressures or needs. We also know that if you put someone between their goal and their family, they're going to choose their family. They're going to choose the people that they rely on and rely on them. And so what we rather do is to put people in direct alignment with their goals so that they don't have to choose between two very important things, their goals and the families. This approach is also built on these core elements of judgment-free conversation. It's a strengths-based approach, personal responsibility to the full system view, and then a focus on the individual's values, what's important to them. I just want to quickly say about this full system view, what we mean there is that we know that no one is making decisions about their life in a silo. And so we have to understand not just the individual choices that a person has made, but the system that they exist in that limits and determines the decisions that they can make. Okay. And so one of the common things we talk about when we have health care goals is, yes, we understand that this person is eating Taco Bell 3 times a week, but we also have to look at the fact that they live in a food desert. okay, where there is not fresh food available for them. So we have to understand both, and family-centered coaching is a model that looks to do that. Here's some of the assumptions that are core to the coaching approach that are built into this model that we want to put participants in the driver's seat of every session. We want to create the environments that make change possible through equitable scaffolding. It means giving folks what they need in order to really make that level. And then empowering coaches to partner with families to make progress on goals based on their values, ideals, hopes, and dreams. This is again where the mindset comes into play. So yes, there's a practice and there are these skills and there are these awesome tools, but we really want to spend time talking about the mindset that's necessary for someone to really become a coach. Fluidity of approach. Our model has 3 different approaches: case management, readiness assessment, and goal practice. It's not just good enough to set a goal. At least that's what we say here, okay? Because I grew up in a home shopping network, set it and forget it. Anybody know what I'm talking about when it comes to goals? And so goal practice is the way that we really help a person lock in what are the behaviors that are going to be necessary for me to really move this thing forward in my life and not just be another one of those moments. Here are the phases of our model. Again, it is both a framework, it is a practice, and it's also a mindset. And so our model starts off wide. We don't start at the goal, we start at the relationship. Okay, we started building a relationship, preparing ourselves, starting really wide. And then through each phase, we narrow in on a goal. But we only get to the goal once we've developed a trusting and collaborative relationship, all right, with folks. Coaching practice, I talked about this stuff already, but there's a framework, there's a mindset, there's an approach, there are coaching skills and tools that all go into helping to make a person a coach. I'm going to leave off there because I want to pass it off to Donna so that Donna can talk about family-centered coaching and why this has been the model for them at DeKalb.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Fran. So excited to join you and excited to be here today to talk about how Georgia Department of Early Care and Learning has incorporated family-centered coaching in how we serve families. So just a little bit about Georgia Department of Early Care and Learning. We oversee several programs. One in particular is we oversee the Child Care Subsidy Program for the state of Georgia. Additionally, we oversee the nutrition program, we have the Early Head Start Partnership, and we also oversee licensing for all child care providers, as well as Georgia's pre-K program. So specifically, when we decided to engage with the prosperity agenda, was actually they reached out to us and it was really exciting because it had been put out there that we were using a 2-generational approach to supporting families. We moved the Child Care Subsidy Program in particular from the Department of Family and Children's Services to child care. And the reason we moved it is we wanted to align services. Our commissioner was really committed to making certain that we did more than, and I'm going to do this in air quotes, just provide services. She wanted to make certain that we were supporting families because our agency had traditionally worked primarily with child care providers. So we started a family support unit. And this unit is comprised of staff who really, their goal is to really engage with families along the course of the time they're receiving child care subsidy. And we were approached by the prosperity agenda to see if there was some alignment. And as I learned more, I was like, ooh, this sounds good. This is right where, this is a sweet spot of what we're trying to get to. We did look at other coaching models, but this one really resonated with us for a couple of reasons. One thing I love about this model is there are 2 components, 2 key components. One is mindset, which is what Fran talked about. And so the mindset piece was so important to us because one of the things we found when we transitioned the program from the Department of Family and Children's Services is we had staff who had been in a space of a mindset of gotcha. I'm going to prove you're wrong. I know how to fix you. I know how to deal with your situation. I know what's needed. But that was not what we wanted to do with our families. We wanted to partner with our families. And as Fran said, family-centered coaching provided us that opportunity. Another key component of it is the toolkit, and that's the coaching toolkit, and giving our staff the steps of how to coach, how not to fix, but how to think about what their experiences and what they're engaged in and what they bring to the table. You know, how does that impact conversations? How does that impact making a decision of whether or not to move further in the process, ask important questions, or just taking what the parent said and saying, okay, okay, next. So let me give you a little bit about how we're structured. We have 4 units within our child care subsidy program. We have our scholarship administration unit, and that unit is responsible. They're the front door for child care subsidy. They are responsible for determining if a family is eligible for child care for our program. And we have some pretty strict requirements. I mean, because of funding, we have to structure it in a way that best serves the community. So we have that unit. Then the next step in the process is if you are determined to be eligible, you move to family support. This is a team that I developed, I started, and I've been with since 2016. And in this unit, they are responsible for handling case changes, for redeterminations, but another real important piece to that is they are responsible for staying with the family for the entire time they're engaged in the program. This is where we applied the toolkit, because we wanted to make certain that they were able to talk to families about what their goals are, what their desires are, so that we could provide resources and connect them to the agencies and organizations that they need. So toolkit was really important for us. We actually expanded the toolkit because another key piece for us was having child development included in it. So we could have important conversations about their goals around their child's life and their outcomes and their development. The other unit within our division is, oh my gosh, my brain just shut down, provider relations. So provider relations, you may think, well, why is that important? Well, that's a unit that's a little different because they specifically work with providers, but there's a lot of goal setting in the provider piece, a lot of serious conversations. And we try to use that. So our staff has been trained to be able to use those tools, the coaching mindset, when they're talking to providers and not telling providers what you should be doing to support families. Then we have adverse actions and claims. And this is a real important one because this is a group that decides whether or not you have a valid claim or if there should be an adverse action because of an action that took place on behalf of the parent and or provider. That's real important because you're making a decision and we needed to make certain that especially this group, that they are aware of the mindset that they're using and not the judgment, that they're asking real questions. And then the last area is our training area. So training, they're responsible for making certain that our trainings, and we have policy as well, making certain that our policies align. So how did we use family-centered coaching? We decided that every single person who comes through the doors of our program, who is hired, everyone is required to take mindset. That is the core of the training to me. That training provides us the opportunity to make certain that our staff are thinking about how, if they're parking their things at the door, if they're thinking about, you know, maybe they had a bad day. I mean, I had one employee to say to me, well, I don't engage with, with parents who have 7 children and they're 40 years old. And I'm thinking, why? And we later learned that it was because of a past experience. And that was actually, when we looked at the data, she was denying families eligibility because she wasn't asking the key questions. So for us, mindset is key. The coaching is the next piece, and that is really reserved for our family support team who are working with families every day and really helping them to identify their next steps and what they want to do. We have a strong partnership with Technical College System of Georgia, which is our technical program. And with that, we want to make certain that we're asking questions to determine if a parent has a goal of going back to school, getting training. So we find that this tool is very instrumental and helpful in helping us to make certain that our staff is, first of all, thinking about what they bring to the conversation, and then secondly, using the tools so that they can help coach and help families set goals. I think that's it.
Thank you, Donna, so much. I appreciate your insights and the depth of your layout about the why and the how you did it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and more questions for you and for Fran in our breakout in a few minutes. Next, we're going to hear from John Mckay, from Senior Program Analyst from Mathematica, about Goal for It. And also Jerry Cotter, who is a program manager for the Ohio Department of Jobs and Family Services. Thank you again for participating today, guys.
All right, thanks so much, Jeanette. Can you hear me okay? Excellent. Well, good afternoon and good morning, everybody. My name is John Mckay. I am an analyst at Mathematica, and I am one of the developers of Goal for It in partnership with lots of other people who I'll be mentioning shortly. Goal for It, simply put, is a coaching practice model built on the science of self-regulation, goal attainment, and behavioral theory. And I think as we go through this, you'll see a lot of similarities, right? A lot of the foundation that Fran covered is baked in here, but I want to focus on some of the key pieces that I think are a little bit unique about Goal for It today. And I want to start with this. This is a picture of a coral reef. And what's important to know about a coral reef is not to simply get caught up in the beautiful things that you see here, right? Focus on that fish or that coral. But there is a very vibrant and complex ecosystem at play here. And that ecosystem is what actually empowers all of the beautiful individual pieces of life that you see represented here. Without that ecosystem being in careful balance and working together in an aligned way, we would not have what we see here. And because of the effects of climate change, right, we see that coral reefs are actually suffering mightily because the balance, the environment is not aligned to what the coral reef needs. And I want to bring that analogy into talking about coaching because I think it's absolutely critical to understand how our ecosystems are aligned with the approaches that we're striving to use at the front line. That really has a lot to do with how Goal for It is designed, right? As a coaching model, again, it uses many of the principles that were described earlier, and you'll hear about the process that's central to it as well. But at the end of the day, we need a systems approach if we're actually going to achieve systems transformation. And because we work in a complicated systems environment, TANF programs, right, are situated in these complex environments, we need a much broader approach than simply thinking about how we can change the relationship between the practitioner and the family. That is important, and Goal for It helps to achieve that. But it's also important that we think about these other layers, right? So at that centermost part of the environment, we have the staff-client interaction. That's direct service. And we want to change the way that that relationship unfolds. We want to build it on trust. We want to build it on non-judgment. But if you take it a layer out, right, what are those team and supervisory practices and relationships that support that staff and client interaction? If all we do is we change the staff-client interaction, but we don't do something to change the environment in which it sits, we are setting ourselves up for conflict, tension, confusion, frustration, and disappointment on the part of those staff and ultimately the part of those families, because the system hasn't been realigned to support a coaching approach. Take us out a layer further. We need to think about the organizational culture and structures, right? Many of you operate TANF programs in an environment where you've got a county or state agency that's contracted with multiple providers. How are those organizational cultures being restructured and realigned to support this new approach? Moving away from that compliance-oriented and transactional way of doing business, which is so baked into sort of the regulatory nature of TANF, and to shift it toward a motivation-driven approach. Finally, we got to think about the community context too, right? Because coaching in one environment and one culture is going to look fundamentally different than another, right? If we're trying to think about how we embed a coaching approach in a tribal environment in Minnesota, that's going to look very different than a coaching program in urban Houston, which is also going to look different than a coaching approach in Vermont. So we got to think about this community context as well, and how do we adapt these models to ensure that they're both responsive to the community and designed with and for the community. Goal for It was designed in a response to a gap that we saw in the field. So Mathematica, as some of you may know, is not a training technical assistance provider. We're not a program that develops coaching models. We're a research organization. And so we stumbled into the business of helping to create a model, because what we wanted to achieve was to translate the science around coaching into practice. 3 things that are really critical to know about Goal for It. The first is that it bakes in the science of self-regulation skills. That's a term I'm sure many of you are familiar with, but just to name it so that we're all on the same page, these are the skills that allow us to intentionally control our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Those are the skills that we need to succeed at work, to succeed in school, to succeed whether we're 5 years old, 50 years old, or 100 years old. And those are the exact skills that can be practiced and developed through a coaching model and a goal pursuit approach. Goal for It bakes that into the way that people interact. The second is obviously goal pursuit. But what that means is we need a set of specific steps for setting, planning, and reviewing our goals. If all I do is talk about the goals that I want to achieve, but I don't follow a systematic approach, then I'm unlikely to be as successful as I could be. And research has demonstrated that if you follow certain steps, that increases our likelihood of goal achievement. Lastly, the science around behavior change is critical here. We know that change is the result of a combination of an individual's motivation, their ability to take action, and their opportunity to take action. If you don't have motivation, ability, or opportunity, then behavior change is unlikely to happen. Think of it as a multiplication equation. If one of those is 0, but you've got the other 2 in place, the end result is going to be 0. So if you're missing one, the whole thing is unlikely to succeed. And so that's a core part of what Goal for It is trying to achieve. Behavior change built on motivation, ability, and opportunity. So there's a 4-step process that anchors Goal for It. You'll hear a lot about that when Donna talks as well, because we collaborated and we shared a lot of the same science and research that was unfolding. But this 4-step process around setting a goal, creating a plan, doing or taking action, and then reviewing, that 4-step forms a cycle that is repeated over and over and over. And one of the key tenets of Goal for It is that by practicing this process over and over and over again, you're actually building your ability to use it without some of the tools and scaffolding that your coach might be helping you with at first. So this 4-step process is going to seek to activate the individual's motivation and commitment to change in that goal setting step. We're going to tap into the technique of visualization and ensure that you're motivated by what it is you're saying you want to achieve. We're going to help you create a specific plan, right? And that plan is going to then help you take action. And as you take action, you're actually using those self-regulation skills, because as the research from Harvard University suggests that you practice them in situations that matter, that's how those skills get better. You have to practice them in situations that matter. Much like a muscle in an exercise routine. You keep practicing it over and over again, it's going to get stronger. The last thing here that I want to say is that it's about closing the learning loop. So often in goal pursuit, we set the goal, create the plan, take action, but we don't come back around and understand not just did we achieve it or did we not, but what worked? What worked well, what didn't work well? Hey, you know, I completely failed on my goal. That's okay, because we can learn something from that failure. We got to fail fast and fail forward. What is it that I learned about myself through trying to achieve my goal, and what can I do next? That's that motivational and supportive accountability as you're closing the learning loop, reviewing your goal, and coming back around to set a new one or revise the existing one that you set. So as you're working through Goal for It, again, that's going to change the relationship between the staff and the client, but we need to reframe our mindset, right? It's about that system. And so the system needs to recenter the individual's motivation, not program activities. How do we do that? We use that replicable process, but we also have to think about changing team culture and organizational culture, and even responding appropriately to the community context. We also need to think about accountability no longer as a dirty word. That's not a sanction or a threat of sanction. That's about somebody's motivation. Accountability is a powerful tool. So let's think differently about it as something that we can use in the coaching relationship. As I've mentioned, self-regulation skills are a key part of this. And so we're actually strengthening our skill sets as we facilitate the 4-step process. Time management, organization, response inhibition, all of those things are going to come into play. The coaching relationship is one where you can reflect on how that's going. And again, you're setting clear boundaries so the coach is not stepping in and over-functioning for the individual. And last, you're thinking about how do we cultivate opportunities. Every single goal, big or small, is an opportunity to build a skill and make progress. And so time and time again, I've worked with people at the front line who'll say, hey, John, this is awesome, but it's just not going to work for this family over here. And I always want to reframe that and say, no, the family that you think is least ready for Goal for It is the family that is most ready and needs an approach to setting goals and taking action. So whether it's big or small, whether it's a goal you can accomplish today or in a year, we need to think about what is the opportunity for that person to take a step forward and to practice skill building in the process. And so at every level, right, Goal for It can help change that staff-client interaction, that direct service piece, and there's a toolkit for that. But then if you move a layer out, right, there's a whole separate approach around using the same coaching, the same goal pursuit between supervisors and staff. If it's good enough for you, the family, it's good enough for me, the professional. Goal for It Pro is the way that we start to change that relationship. The organizational culture, right? We need a different way of thinking about leadership, motivation-driven leadership, not just the way that we have approached our program for all of this time. How do we bake in that motivation in the way that we lead as well? And then the community context is about pulling together all of our organizations in a way that's using the same language and the same principles and the same approaches. So I want to hand it off to my colleague, Jerry, who's going to talk a little bit about how this has been used in Ohio, and to give you a little more practical sense of what Goal for It looks like. Jerry?
Thanks, John. So in Ohio, we've been working towards implementing Goal for It across the state. We're about halfway there. If you can go to the next slide, please. Or am I doing that? Okay. So some of the benefits of our efforts to implement in Ohio is, of course, closer relationships between clients and coach case managers. And, as Jonathan mentioned, Goal for It and the coaching model itself, I think, helps increase motivation and also protect motivation of clients. And then there is increased accountability. I know we talked about that a little bit. I think this is really helpful because we've had some case managers before they implement Goal for It, where they're either not really supportive of the client or they're overly supportive of the client. So with the coaching model, it puts the accountability for achieving the goals and working towards them on the client, which I think increases accountability. It also has the same like a parallel effect of reducing the danger of compassion fatigue for coaching case managers, since the accountability is back on the client to achieve their goals. Some of the challenges we've experienced in Ohio, trying to implement it across the state. We have 88 counties, so it's a bit of a challenge there, but Ohio is a state supervised county administered state. So there's a lot of autonomy between counties and how they administer and implement programs. And a lot of the staff that was part of the CCMEP program, which is Comprehensive Case Management and Employment Program, which is our program in Ohio, which combines TANF and WEO youth funds. A lot of those folks who started out with the program started out with sort of a transactional mindset where they were focused on more compliance-oriented type activities. So we're trying to move away from that and focus on developing that positive relationship by using a coaching model. And again, that protects the motivation, it empowers clients. Of course, it's hard to change, and changing mindsets in particular is very hard. You know, we've had some case managers who don't really have a lot of hope for their clients' you know, futures, what they can accomplish. So we've been working on that. Also just doing things differently. So like, for example, with the Go For It model, there's some tools to sort of facilitate conversations, and they're you know, sort of, I don't know, just colorful forms, right? But they're not required. It's more about, you know, the actual conversations you're having with somebody. So with that transactional mindset, we had some folks that focused more on those forms and thinking that they had to do them all. So, so we've had, you know, ongoing training to make sure that we're dispelling some of those misunderstandings of folks as they try and change their mindset. Also, I'm sure this has been an issue in many states. We've had a lot of changeover in leadership, staff, and then also youth service providers that we're working with. They've had a lot of turnover as well. So we've had to continuously provide training and support for folks, whether they've begun implementing Go For It or not. So we just have to be really, I think, diligent in making sure we're providing as much support as possible and ongoing training with our local partners to make sure that they continue to implement the coaching model as it's intended. Also, supporting this effort has been a challenge due to our own team capacity, but I think we've got a plan to move towards sustainability in the future. Next slide, please. So some of the successes, as I mentioned initially, we've just reached over the 50% mark as far as the number of counties that are implementing Go For It. We've got some model counties who have been doing a fantastic job with it. Clark County, they've done a great job. They've been working with their youth. They took on another project with Mathematica and HHS. And I think that their youth using the coaching model did a great job. They actually had the youth start to facilitate some of their group meetings and stuff. And it's been really inspirational. Also Summit County, which is where Akron is. I don't know if you're familiar with Akron, Ohio. Anyway, I just went on a visit there. They really have a great coaching model in place. I got to view some of their workshops and working with the youth in groups and also individually. And it was really inspiring to see how engaged their youth are. And I know that a lot of that engagement is a result of their coaching model that they've implemented. We've also received a lot of positive feedback from both participants and staff with the coaching model. Participants, I think, feel like they're finally being heard and someone actually cares about what they'd like to do in their life. That's a common theme we hear from participants. And then from the coaches, they feel like they are having a much better and closer relationship with participants and, you know, really getting to know them and what they'd like to achieve better. So I mentioned sustainability. That's been a challenge with the pandemic, particularly. We had to move to more of a virtual format as we've tried to train and continue to increase the number of counties implementing the coaching model. I think it's really important to have champions and at all levels, really, as well as support and buy-in. So I think having champions among leadership, also amongst staff, that really helps with sustainability long-term, and it helps to have staff buy in to making the change and changing their mindsets and continuing with the change, which is very important. Also, I think practice and role playing is really important. So as you know, folks can begin to implement or continue with their implementation. And then we've been using the LI squared model. I think you're familiar with that. As part of especially implementing in a particular county. They all have their own processes or providers too. So I think road testing makes sure that they are able to really incorporate it into their process fully. And then Jonathan mentioned the supervision style incorporation. So we are also trying to get folks to use coaching model in their supervision of staff, which again, that makes it more likely that it will continue, and both staff, supervisors, and managers will understand the coaching model and will continue to support it long term. And then we are continuing to provide ongoing implementation, ongoing support even after they've implemented. So we are, we've got a community practice meeting that's going on. We're gonna start doing some case reviews, to talk about how the coaching model is being implemented with different cases. And then our next steps as we continue to move forward is to try and work with Mathematica so we can grow some local leaders who can help support the implementation of Goal Forward in Ohio with folks that are actually located in Ohio and who've been using Goal Forward for a couple of years. So I think that will really help, having some of our local partners able to be part of that support to other local partners as they begin to implement and continue implementing Goal Forward. And then we're also at the point, since we've sort of gone over that 50% mark, that critical mark, we're going to start incorporating the use of coaching as part of our policy. So this way we'll incorporate it, and ultimately we are going to have all of our counties using the coaching model. So I'm pretty excited about that.
All right. Well, thank you both, John and Jerry. I really appreciate your insights and sharing your information and your story, Jerry. Thank you. Next, we're hearing from Donna Pavetti on the Goal Plan Do Review Revise, GPDRR, and also Rhonda Archer, Program Manager from the Oklahoma Department of Human Services. I know we're running a little over, so let's try to stay on 10 minutes for the team to speak, and then so at least we still have 20 minutes for the Q&A, because I know a lot of the sites will have questions to go a little deeper.
Can you see my screen?
We can, thank you.
Okay, so I will try and go quickly. John sort of gave some of the background. I just want to sort of give a little bit about, I think that one of the things just sort of in the, just a little bit about background about how this came about. So, man, it's probably almost 10 years ago at this point. The Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University, which focuses, as their name suggests, focused on kids, and did a lot of work around executive function and really the importance of that for kids. And part of what the conclusion they came to was that if they did not focus on really trying to think about parents as well, they were always going to be swimming upstream. So they convened a meeting where they brought together people who were working with kids and people who were working primarily with adults to really begin to think about how could we really sort of develop something that really sort of took what they knew about executive function and really sort of develop that into tools that the field could use around really helping to build that among adults. So they asked me if I would lead that project. And so I agreed to do that. And just sort of coincidentally, I happen to have a daughter who has learning disabilities, and executive function is very important in terms of working with kids with learning disabilities. And I had a book on the side of my bed called Smart But Scattered. And I was reading it and I thought, I need a Smart But Scattered for adults. Because it really sort of laid out executive functions and how they played out in people's day-to-day lives. So I reached out to one of the authors of that book, Dick Greer, who really sort of, I think for many of us who are in this field, we owe an incredible debt to, because he taught us a lot about the goal sequence, but also how executive function skills really sort of play into that. So part of what the Goal Plan, Do, Review, and Revise sort of model does is to try and simplify and sort of link together the executive function skills and to make explicit what we often have as implicit in what we do. So that when you're actually sort of setting a goal, you're relying on executive function skills. You're having to think about, well, what matters to me, which is metacognition, and you're having to hold that in memory. That's working memory. When you're planning, you're using organization, you're using time memory. So it was really sort of trying to pull all this together. And we started out, to be perfectly honest, with a model that really was sort of focused on trying to focus on those skills explicitly, and learned that it was much too complicated a model. And so then really sort of moved to a model that really sort of focused on these steps, and that really sort of, again, we're making explicit what many workers are already doing, and really trying to think about how do you sort of embed that in the work that people do. So John sort of talked a lot about the model. So I'm not going to talk about that because the model is the same. What I really want to talk about is what we did in terms of training and why. So one thing that is sort of, I think, really important is when you think about the steps, setting a goal, developing a plan, executing it, and then reviewing it and revising it. The one thing that I sort of feel like I learned most through really thinking about the executive function is how little we do about helping people to develop plans that we often assume once the goal is in place, families can go through that next step. And we've learned that that's really much more complicated than we'd like to think. And so one of the things we have in the training is something called backward mapping, where you start with the goal and say, what are the steps that I need to get there, and what resources do I need? So really developing a process and building skills that people can use. And again, making that so much more explicit and really helping to build those muscles and skills that help them to succeed. So what I did this project for about 5 years, and in the last year of the project, one of the things that was really important to me, that I really wanted to figure out a way to leave something for the field. And one of the things that I really saw and was concerned about was that there was sort of a lot of sort of coaching models that were becoming available, but I was concerned for two sort of things. One is that not every program would have the resources to be able to pay for the training, and also what do you do with staff turnover? So you always have to have sort of a way to sort of keep sort of building that capacity. So what we decided to do was to create, working with some of our partners who are experts in adult learning, an open source course that really sort of is available to anybody who wants to use it at no cost. So it's designed, the other thing that I was concerned about is that often my experience with training is when you go in and do training, you don't have time to implement it, and it doesn't sort of get integrated into the work. So there was sort of the adult learning principles of really making it sort of relevant to people's day-to-day, but also really sort of creating it so that it isn't sort of you go out for a day of training, it's done over time, it's integrated into workers' day-to-day so they can try it out. It's also flexible. You can use what you want when you want it and not have to sort of use the whole thing. So it's really adaptable to fit those individual circumstances. You can also use it with other models. And when Rhonda talks, she's going to talk about, that's the way they've done it. And then there's lots of supplementary materials there, including materials of how do you sort of do this in a group setting. And again, one of the things I think is really important is that it is available for anybody who wants to use it. You don't have to ask, you don't have to, it's no cost involved. You can use it, you can go in, sort of figure out how it will be used, and you can use it any way you want. And the course is really sort of has a number. It starts with a foundation. Then it sort of goes into what it takes to achieve a goal. It's how you can have insights into the strengths and struggles and how they can help us to move forward. And then there really is a piece that is a core, which is about focusing on how people can effectively set their goals. And then how do you make it work in your setting? So really being specific. So that sort of, again, is available. I've listed on the slide the website where you can go and you can sort of see what is there. You can sort of figure out whether it works. There also is a separate sort of website, which is the Executive Function Works Library, which is just a lot of resources about executive function. And I included some other thing we did, which is a wish outcome obstacle plan, which is a very quick sort of intervention to help people sort of set goals and figure out what might get in their way and helping them to plan, which some programs love because you don't have to make a lot of changes, you can just implement it. So with that, I'm going to stop and turn it over to Rhonda so she can talk about what they've done in Oklahoma.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rhonda Archer, and I'm with Oklahoma. I'm a TANF program manager, and it's really an honor to be able to be here today to be a part of this exciting group. I want to thank Mary for giving me the opportunity to be able to come to you and visit a little bit about our passion in Oklahoma. So just a little bit about how we started our journey. We started in 2018 when Oklahoma was chosen to participate in a learning community known as EYES. Some of you guys have heard of that because you were there, which was integrating in innovative employment and economic stability strategies. Try to say that fast 5 times. We all came together and we were able to meet with curriculum developers from all over the state. And that's where we first met with several of you guys here in this meeting today. Fast forward, we decided to use family-centered coaching, but then we also chose to use parts of some of the other curricula that we thought would work well in Oklahoma. We chose family-centered coaching as it was the right fit with the ideas that we had about trying to work with our families as a whole. We felt that working with the families as a whole would be more towards working at ending multi-generational poverty, and goal setting seemed to be the next logical step in our process. So coming back to Oklahoma, we had a couple of major goals that we needed to, or hurdles we needed to overcome, and that was getting our executive leadership as excited as we were, and helping our staff to understand that this is not only a win for our TANF families, but also for the staff, in getting them to understand that if you take the time in the beginning with our families, you're not going to have to spend as much time later with them, and it actually saves time, and in the process helping our families to lifelong sustainability. So the first thing that we did was we presented all of this information that we learned to our leadership. And our executive leadership was pretty much on the same page that we were. And so that was an easy sell. The next wasn't quite as easy. So helping our staff to understand in their minds was they were already thinking we are already understaffed and overworked. And their big question was, how will we be able to do coaching and serve the families as a whole without adding staff? And their next question was, what about our work participation rate? So our TANF administrator, Paulette Kendrick, asked them to buy into 3 points. The first point was, it's about family stability first. The second point was, it's their life goal, not mine. And the third one was, it's not about the numbers, it's about lifetime sustainability. So the first thing is when a family comes into our office, we need to look at where the family is. Right at that particular moment, they can't think about making goals for the future when they don't know where food is coming from for this evening, or how they're going to buy diapers, or where formula is coming from. And so we need to start out with that very first time that we talk to a TANF family or a TANF individual, whoever's in the office, is you start out right then by building that relationship with them. Building that relationship starts out the very first time they call the office, or the very first time they walk in that office. It starts out with the receptionist, or it starts out with that person that answers that telephone. So making sure that everybody in the office understands how important it is to make sure that they start off with a positive relationship with our TANF families. And we need to make sure that their immediate needs are taken care of. Here's the first time we start looking at goal setting. For the staff member, the goal at that particular time for the staff member is to assist in their best ability to be able to help this family with their basic needs and making sure that they're taken care of. Once the family's basic needs are being met, then we can start working with the family on their goal setting. Second, some of our staff, as I'm embarrassed to say, we're in the habit of saying things such as, well, when you're on TANF, you have to do this and you have to do that. And, you know, you have to do this. And, you know, I don't really know if, you know, you're interested in doing this. And so the second buy-in point was getting the staff to understand that while there are some things that are required by policy, we need to make sure that the TANF families understand the opportunities that TANF gives them. Part of what we needed the staff to understand is that most of our families know what their goals and dreams are. They just don't understand that they have that answer, nor have they been given the opportunity to really dream. And third, our staff, as well as our county administrators, have always been focused on WPR. While they should be, but our directive to the staff at this point was, in the beginning, you may start to see your numbers drop. But if you're working the program as it is meant to be, then you'll start seeing the numbers going up as well as your success rate. In the end, do we want to have a higher WPR? Yes, but our ultimate goal is lifetime sustainability for our TANF families. And we honestly felt that we were building the program to be able to do both, have a higher WPR as well as seeing our families obtain that lifetime sustainability. How did we do this? We started with 5 pilot counties. We started,
Rhonda,
yes.
I'm gonna have to cut you off and have you be able to tell your story with the Q&A because we're
sorry.
a little, no. Everybody's listening. Everyone has such a great story to tell. But so what I'd like to do is I'm going to ask Ida Johnson, and obviously Ida Johnson's from the Public Consulting Group, and Kimberly Arista from Hawaii Department of Human Services. And if you guys can, I know it's kind of tight. It's tight for everyone. Thank you, Rhonda. But let's do 10 minutes, and then Casey Gray will break into breakouts for 20 minutes. And Rhonda, if you could continue that and answer some of the questions that our participants will have for you, I really would appreciate it.
I can do that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ida, you're up.
Hello, everyone. And Rhonda, that was awesome. So thank you so much for that. I totally agree with what Dr. Nicole said, providing the opportunity to dream versus just kind of being the robot and just doing what you're told to do. So thanks for bringing that to the forefront. I, of course, because today is the day, the sharing is taking me a little longer. So just give me 1 second. Awesome. Can you see my screen okay? Should be good. Awesome. Okay.
I think it's good. Thank you.
All righty. And I'm just going to go for it. So trying to get this in presentation mode. All right. So we are talking about our model, Coaching for Success. And we have here our colleague from Hawaii, Kimberly, and we will be chatting just about our model in general. And we've already talked about principles, right? Principles are going to remain the same, but the methods and the nuances that are different is what we're really going to highlight here. And then we'll get into a deeper dive in the larger session. So an overview, our framework is really focused on the person-centered nature, right? Like we've heard already today, and really having more of a strengths-based approach to making sure that clients are doing the change they want to see for their lives, right? We all can agree that everyone wants to have an amazing, thriving life. And so when we take the perspective of, I need to come and fix it, like we talked about earlier today, or you need my help to identify what is like maybe complicated or wrong in your life, then that really does not kind of shine through with the patient-centered relationship-based approach. And so we've taken that and we've coupled it with having a very specific goal-orientated focus, but wrapped it all in mindset. Right? We've heard so much about mindset today. It's really about mindset, right? The mindset will carry those principles forward and allow all methods to really kind of be consistent based on what that client needs. And of course, we have sustainable change in monitoring and evaluation. And so this is what our process tends to be. Now, this curriculum, and we'll go through some of the tools, we have worked with OFA, the Office of Family Assistance, to develop this curriculum, right? We've worked with a number of states on implementing this curriculum, so it's pretty tried and true. And so we take a three-step approach, assessing, training, and then focusing on sustainability. And why are these things so important? Well, we don't believe that we should have a one-size-fits-all model. Right? We believe that every system has its unique culture, every state or county has its unique nuances, and we want to be able to honor that. And so instead of saying, hey, this is our thing, this is what needs to be implemented, instead, we take an approach that says, hey, what cultural practices do you have that we need to actually implement in a customized training for you? This looks like language. This looks like different best practices, right? And Kim can speak to this a little bit about what that experience looked like, but we did take the time to do more in-depth assessments with the leadership team and the frontline staff, the folks who are there day-to-day, understanding what participants and clients are going through in order to develop a curriculum that made sense for them. Just allows for a different level of ownership. Then we went training, right? And at the time, this was an in-person situation, but the world has shifted. Fancy that. Anyone's opening their eyes and looking outside knows that one. And so we actually were doing hybrid instruction-led training prior to that. But that is something that we offer. Additionally, we have e-learnings, right? A lot of folks feel like, what if I can't just, we don't have the budget for in-person or travel? It's okay. There is something for everyone. So we have e-learning. We personally like to think about sustainability at the beginning. So as you'll hear when Kim shares, we actually partnered with their training team and partner with training teams and say, okay, how can we teach you and focus on a train the trainer methodology in order to actually have the tools you need so that when we're gone, you don't have to continuously call us back and then do it all over again in order for it to still fly. We're really embedding principles and mindsets into a culture. We do hands-on practice. We do things that make sense with scenarios that make sense from the community that we're serving. And we'll be able to speak a little bit more about that. And then we have different types of learning, right? We did case manager training. We also did administrative training when we were in Hawaii. And those trainings were a little different depending on the level of supervision, the types of cases they were going to see, not because the principles are different, but because the methods that need to be implemented would be different based on the role in the organization. And then again, sustainability, right? We did all types of things. We'll go into depth on what those looked like and the pitfalls to kind of look out for, and like, let's have the real talk. We're not going to say it's going to be sustainable and everything's going to be great, because that's not always the case, right? But we can talk more about what that looked like in real practice and what types of things and how we can equip our clients to really support the overall model. So that is our overview. Here are just a little bit more in depth on our topics. We, of course, take a person-centered approach. We really want all of our folks who are being coached, and like someone said, it's like kind of coaching an adult child. And my eldest will be 22 in October. And I just say, listen, these are the principles, but let's see, it looks like you want to get here. What things can you figure out, and I can help you with scaffolding. I think someone mentioned that, in order to reach your goals, right? So there I'm listening and we're reflecting on what needs to happen. All of these types of things happen in our trainings as well. Making sure that we have a goal is also super important, right? And then wrapping it around with that mindset. So we'll talk more about tools in our actual session. I want to be able to just give Kim a moment to kind of just say hello, and I'll do kind of an overview. Our colleague had to drop just based on timing, Robin, but just an overview of what we're going to talk about in our breakout session. We really, really hope you all come and join us so we can dive deeper. Kim's really going to speak to what that initial phase looked like, the journey, right? Let's have some real talk about the journey. We'll talk about the tools and how those were implemented. And we'll talk about how that sustainability worked, what it looked like for them and the lessons learned. And then we can talk about how we can support each individual client, because really, again, the principles are the same, but the methods are different. Kim, you want to wave, say hello?
Just want to say hey and aloha from Hawaii, and I'm so happy to be with all of you this morning, and I look forward to hopefully connecting with you in our little session, and I can share a little bit more, and we can talk story about what coaching for success and our implementation journey has looked like for us. So thanks again.
Thanks so much, Kim. Thanks, Jeanette.
Wow. Kim, you get the award of staying for the 1 minute. No, but thank you so much, everyone, of what wonderful information you shared. I really sincerely appreciate it. Now I'm going to ask Casey Gray, Applegate, the project coordinator, again to move us into our breakouts. We will still have a good 20 minutes to ask questions in these breakouts and to talk and learn a little bit more, and for the speakers to share. Rhonda, for sure, for you to finish your story that you just were starting, and Kimberly to share more about your journey. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Casey Gray. Applegate, if you could just take us through the logistics of what's happening now.
Sure. Thanks, Jeanette. Hi, everyone. In just a moment, I will open up these 4 breakout rooms, one for each topic. Our